In this video, we got some big rumors to talk about. Werewolf by Night could be coming to the MCU. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle Haas. And in this video, we got to talk about Werewolf by Night because recently it's been reported that Kevin Smith, famously the writer and director of Clerks and current creator of the He-Man animated series, recently reported that he was actually told by Marvel Studios that he was unable to use the Werewolf by Night character in one of the shows he was developing because, quote, the movie studio has plans for him. So in this video, we're going to go through the news, we're going to look at that article, we're going to talk about this rumor, and then we're going to talk about the books that we may want to pick up for the Werewolf by Night character. But before I get into that stuff, if you guys could drop me a like or a comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, help support the channel, do one of those things, and I would appreciate it. All right, that said, let's get into this news here today. And this, again, is another one of those sort of rumor roundup videos I'm going to talk about. Last time I did this, I did one on the Wrecking Crew because there was a rumor that they were going to be coming into the MCU. And I asked you guys, hey, do you like this type of thing? And a lot of you said yes. So here we are. We're going to talk about this current news cycle going on with the Werewolf by Night character, what Kevin Smith said. And then later on in the video, we're going to talk about what books to spec on, what books to invest in, and then ultimately where this all could be going. You know, what is this ultimately building towards in the MCU? But before we get into that, let's first talk about this current rumor going on here in the news. I have an article pulled up. This was reported by comicbook.com. And here you can see in the title, Kevin Smith was told Marvel Studios has plans to use Werewolf by Night. So Kevin Smith, of course, you guys know him. He was the writer and director of movies like Clerks. He is now currently working on the He-Man show. Well, he has a podcast called Fat Man Beyond. And he was talking about, you know, in his development of the He-Man show, Masters of the Universe, he was also developing a Howard the Duck animated property as well, and was having communications with Jeff Loeb, who, of course, Jeff Loeb, famous producer, he created the Daredevil show, he created Punisher, he's worked on other Marvel properties, and they were interacting about this. So I just kind of want to point out a few things here just to give you guys the context here. So let me read this for you. 2 years ago, when we announced, hey, we're going to be doing Masters of the Universe, which is now about to happen, we also announced, hey, we're going to be doing Howard the Duck over at Hulu. Remember that? Smith shared with fans. For a red hot minute, I was working on Howard the Duck, and before Dave, Aqua Teen, Hunger Force involved, when it was me, Jeff Loeb was like, hey man, I think you'd be good for Howard the Duck. I reached out to Walter Flanagan from Comic Book Man. I told him that I'm going to be taking a stab at these 70s characters. And then Walt was given the suggestion that we should do Werewolf by Night. He added, in my head, as I started building my season, I was like, all right, episode 5, Werewolf by Night. The idea of our story was that Howard was trapped here and he was going to try to get the pages of the Darkhold, which would allow him to go back. There's Howard as I'm laying it out. And then I go into Jeff and I told him what I wanted to do. And that's when he said, you can't use Werewolf by Night. I asked why. They said the movie division was using him. So that's pretty huge right there, that Kevin Smith essentially has confirmed that the MCU does in fact have plans for Werewolf by Night. Of course, we don't know what property Werewolf by Night will be coming in. Will it be soon? Will it be, you know, a few years from now? Certainly when you look at the slate, it's very possible that he could be showing up in the Moon Knight series. It's very possible he could show up in the Blade series. And hey, I would even throw out that it's possible that he could show up as soon as Doctor Strange. I mean, if we're going to do a multiverse of madness and we're going to bring in all these characters, maybe we're going to bring in Ghost Rider into that show. Ultimately, you know, we could also be bringing in Werewolf by Night. But that's the current report right now. So with that said, you know, assuming that Werewolf by Night is coming into the MCU, let's take a look at some of these books and see, you know, what could be ones to spec on for the market. So the first one we got to talk about, of course, is Werewolf by Night's first appearance. This here is Marvel Spotlight #2. This was written by Gary Conway, drawn by Neil Adams, came out in 1972. And this right here is the first appearance of the character Werewolf by Night, better known by his, you know, human name, which is Jack Russell. And this is a very, very cool book. I mean, one that, you know, came out in this Bronze Age period, right around the time when all these other sort of quote unquote monster characters came out, you know, Dracula, Ghost Rider, Moon Knight, etc. And it feels like the MCU has been building towards this sort of universe in some kind of way, thinking that, you know, we're starting to get like some of these darker elements, starting with Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. And, you know, there, of course, there's also been rumors of the Midnight Suns coming into the MCU as well. So it feels like if in fact that's what we're going to build towards, we are going to need to lay the foundation for these quote unquote monster characters to come into this world. And this one, of course, is a great classic Silver Age book, but one that is extremely expensive, actually currently still in the market, even without this confirmation. publishing. As you can see here, there actually is no 9.8 sales, but there is a 9.6 fair market value, $11,000, so it's a 5-figure book. This last sale was in August of 2020. And then here at the bottom, Go Collect has this, at the $100 range or so, but I think that you would be absolutely hard pressed to find this book for less than $300, $400. I mean, when I go onto eBay, I see this thing, is very, very hot. People wanting to get their hands on this book. So definitely one that's hard to come by. But if we get Werewolf by Night in the MCU, I mean, this is going to be the book that absolutely explodes. But if you don't have the budget to get your hands on this book, why not get Marvel Spotlight #3? This is the second appearance of Moon Knight, of course. And this one's a really, really cool book. I mean, we've talked about second appearances in this current comic book climate, and second appearances are, starting to finally get a lot of respect overall in the market. And what's cool about this one is that this one is actually still really affordable. Even though it's, still an early Bronze Age book, 1972, this is one that I can find on eBay, selling around the $30, $40, $50, $60, depending on the grade you can get, depending on the deal. And that's, honestly not too bad of a price overall, and probably has a lot of potential to grow, into, a 3-figure book later on down the line. Of course, I'm talking about raw values here. And the other thing that's cool about this book is that this is actually considered the first mention of the Darkhold. So they start to lay the foundation of the Darkhold storyline. And, again, that's something that I didn't really even talk about. But of course, we know that we got the Darkhold in WandaVision, and, we're starting to build the foundation of that being, a major plot line in the MCU. And Werewolf by Night has ties to that Darkhold as well as Dracula and other characters within this space. And then as we dig into the numbers here, you'll see 9.8, $575, last sale June of 2020. I don't know how many 9.8s there are in the census, but honestly, for $575, second appearance of Werewolf by Night, that's not too bad. I feel like that has a lot of room to grow. And then here at the bottom, of course, like I said, on eBay, you're going to find this book on eBay, around $40, $50, $60 or so. All right, let's go on now to another book here that's interesting. Another book is, of course, Marvel Spotlight, Werewolf by Night #4. This would be the next book that came out in this series. And of course, this is considered the third appearance of Werewolf by Night. But what is really cool about this book is that this is actually the first appearance of the Darkhold. Now, this is a book that got extremely hot coming off the heels of WandaVision. So one that is already, commanding high prices in the market. But ultimately, if the plot for the Darkhold becomes more and more important, and it becomes like this major, major, major thing within this sort of monster Marvel universe, I feel like this is a book that's going to just continue to go up as it becomes more relevant to the storyline. And as we dig into the numbers here, you'll see 9.8 selling $4,100, but that was back in May of 2020. So you can see here down here, March 2021, these were probably sales coming off the heels of WandaVision, and you can see fair market value commanding around that $725 range. So a book that is pushing that $1,000 range, but one that I believe still probably has a lot of room to grow. All right, let's go on out to the next pick here. The next book is actually Werewolf by Night #1. This would be the first issue of his ongoing series, written by Gary Conway and drawn by Mike Plug, actually. So Plug would end up taking over the art here in the Werewolf by Night run, at least the majority of the beginning books for this one. And this is a very, very cool book as well. I always talk about in my key comic book spotlight videos, like I usually highlight the first appearances, and then I talk about their first solo series or ongoing run. So for me, if I was going to do a Werewolf by Night spotlight video, this would be a book that definitely would make its way on there. And this is a book ultimately that still isn't that expensive overall. I mean, this is Werewolf by Night's fourth appearance now at this point, so people not really excited about fourth appearances, but this is still an important book overall. This is his ongoing series, and I think that this one is definitely a surefire collector's item, and one that'll definitely continue to shoot up if we get Werewolf by Night in the MCU. So this is a book that I recommend people take a look at if you can find a good deal for this one. This is one that I see on eBay still being sold at respectable prices, $50, $60, $70 or so. So one that I think has a lot of potential, especially if you can find a good deal for this one. And as we dig into the numbers here, you'll see 9.8, there is one that sold fair market value $15,000. Now, this might be one of those situations where there's like so few on the market, and being that it's a red cover, I mean, we know those Mephisto books, being that they're red covers, so hard to find perfect 9.8s for them. So it could be that the numbers are inflated specifically for that grade. But again, also 9.6, $2,000 and $1,500 here. So considering what the high end is for this book, I've actually been able to see pretty respectable deals at the low grade. So, a lot of potential for this book. All right, let's go on now to the next book here. And this one is really interesting. This is Tomb of Dracula, number 18. And what is the significance of this? Well, this is actually the first crossover of Werewolf by Night in a different title and the first battle between Werewolf by Night and Dracula. And for that reason, I can see this book getting extremely hot when we build to them in the MCU, because it feels like if you're going to bring Werewolf by Night into the MCU in some kind of way, it feels like you can't do that without bringing Dracula in. I mean, you got to have vampires versus werewolves if you're going to do monsters right. And I could see this being a huge book in the MCU when that eventually happens. Another one to point out here is Werewolf by Night, number 15. This is actually the second time that Werewolf by Night and Dracula go up against each other. These books will be released kind of consecutively back in 1974. And one of the things that's interesting about this particular book is that this is actually considered the origin of Werewolf by Night. Certainly in Marvel Spotlight 2, he had a couple of story beats and panels that explain why he was a werewolf, but in this book right here, they would really expand upon that story. So for me, this is kind of like the official origin of Werewolf by Night. And I think that this is a book that, you can still find really good deals for this book, even cheaper than the ones that I mentioned previously. You can find this for whatever, $30, $40, $20. And for what it's worth, this is a very, very, very cool cover, and people love those cover buys. So this is one that I would definitely consider a great spec overall for the Werewolf by Night character, and not too high of a buy-in. All right, well, those are some of the big Werewolf by Night books, but we still got to talk about Werewolf by Night number 32, 33, and 37. Of course, you guys know what this is. This is the first appearance of Moon Knight, and this is ultimately, for me, where I think the Werewolf by Night character fits in to this sort of Marvel Cinematic Universe in some kind of way. I mean, it has actually been confirmed that Oscar Isaac is playing Moon Knight and that we are going to be getting a Moon Knight show. So to me, it feels like if Marvel wants to bring in Werewolf by Night, I mean, what better way to bring him in than to actually bring him in alongside of Moon Knight? I mean, you can see right here in the Werewolf by Night title run, that's actually when we first got the introduction of the Moon Knight character. So it feels like that could be a very satisfying way to bring in the Werewolf by Night character in that Moon Knight run. And what do you guys say about this book? I mean, this is not a cheap book by any accounts. I mean, who knows what the prices are going to be for this thing when we actually start to get, Moon Knight trailers and we actually start to see Moon Knight in week-to-week episodes for the show. I mean, it's absolutely bananas what this is going to be. This is a four-figure book easily. You're going to be hard-pressed to find any of these books for less than $1,200, $1,500. Werewolf by Night number 32. But there is still cool books to get. Werewolf by Night number 33 and 37. This would be the second appearance and the third appearance of Moon Knight there. And I think that these are really, really cool books to get your hands on. Ones that I think are also good for investment. I mean, they're still dope covers in their own right. And, you can typically find these books like this one right here, second appearance of Werewolf by Night. You can find this book for $120, $150. Still, pretty expensive depending on your budget, but overall not a bad deal considering that, when we get Moon Knight into the MCU, I mean, just this cover alone, people are going to want to get their hands on this stuff. Similarly to this one, still a very cool cultist cover, third appearance of Moon Knight, another one that it might be worth picking up for an investment if you can find a good grade. So if we're putting Moon Knight onto the table and we're putting Werewolf by Night on the table, and we've talked about Ghost Rider, being a great speculative character that might be coming into the MCU, perhaps in Doctor Strange. I mean, we got to talk about Marvel Premiere number 28, first appearance of the Legion of Monsters. And this ultimately feels like what we're building towards in the MCU in some kind of way. Of course, this is a team consisting of Morbius, Werewolf by Night, Ghost Rider, and Man-Thing. You can see them all there on the cover. And this is a book that has been extremely hot in the market, at least in terms of the speculative market. I mean, people thinking that we might get some kind of superhero team of monsters here, and that would be really, really badass. I mean, I feel like a lot of people are hoping that we can get this in the MCU in some kind of way. And if Kevin Feige is trying to bring characters like Werewolf by Night into the fold, ultimately it feels like you would want to build up to this type of thing, possibly an event film in some kind of way, the Legion of Monsters going against some big threat, like who knows, Nightmare, Mephisto guys. Maybe this is going to be the team that goes against Mephisto. So this would be very, very cool. And this is a book that still right now in this market is pretty expensive. I mean, you'd be hard to find this book for less than $200. It's definitely been a hot one, but one that I think is very, very cool. Awesome cover, first appearance of this team, and one that is, a pretty good spec overall coming into the MCU. And as we look into the numbers here, you'll see 9.8's fair market value, $2,400, sale back in 2020. But you can see right here, look at this, July. Everybody feeling like this book might be something to get their hands on for an investment. And I can't blame them. This is just a very, very cool one overall. All right, the last book we got to talk about here is actually Werewolf by Night #1 from 2020. This was written by Taboo. That's right, Taboo of the Black Eyed Peas. And this is a book that came out at the end of last year featuring a character known as Jake Lopez. He is a Native American character. Similar to Jack Russell, his family was cursed with the werewolf thing, and he now is the Werewolf by Night. And I have to point out this book here because, knowing what we know about Marvel, making a push towards like diversity, wanting to do different types of characters, I could actually see them doing a character like this, maybe like they want to do the Jake Lopez character, bring on a Native American into the MCU fold. And for that reason, this is a book that we should all probably be keeping our eyes on. I mean, if we get this version of Werewolf by Night in the MCU and not the Jack Russell version, I still think those other Werewolf by Night books will be worth having. But this one right here, if we get this specific character, will be the one that really pops off and goes crazy in the market. So definitely one to keep your eyes on, and one that you can still pretty much find for cover price on eBay. I mean, you got to pay that shipping fee, but one that hasn't really exploded in the market as of late. Anyways, that is all I have for this video. That is my rumor roundup for Werewolf by Night. I would love to see Werewolf by Night in the MCU. I mean, I'm one that knows a little bit about the character. I didn't grow up reading the Werewolf by Night books, but I love me some monsters. I love the vampires versus werewolves. So it'd be really cool to see how Marvel handles that type of universe. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I will see you in the next video.